I always knew my sister Charlotte saw me as background noise. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred books to parties, archives to social events. She was the golden child. Polished, charismatic, ruthless. But at our mother's funeral, 3 days before Christmas, she made our dynamic a public fact in the cruelest way possible. The church was full. Our entire town had come to pay respects. I had invited one of Mom's oldest friends, a woman named Margaret who had known her since college. Charlotte hated Margaret for reasons I never understood. Old jealousies maybe. Ancient grudges. When Margaret walked in and sat beside me, Charlotte's face went cold. After the service, as people gathered to offer condolences, Charlotte approached me. "You invited her," she hissed, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "You could not help yourself, could you? Always causing drama. Always making things about you." I tried to explain, but she cut me off. She looked at the security guard the church had hired for crowd control. She nodded toward me. "My sister is upset and needs to leave. Can you escort her out?" The humiliation was absolute. The guard, looking uncomfortable but following orders, took my arm gently. I was walked out of my own mother's funeral, sobbing while everyone watched. The last thing I saw was Charlotte's cold stare from the front pew. The reading of the will happened 2 days later, on Christmas Eve. Charlotte, as the executor, sat in Mom's favorite armchair in the living room of our childhood home. I sat on the couch, small and quiet, like I always had. Mom's lawyer, Mr. Ellis, a kind older man with wire-rimmed glasses, read through the document. The house went to Charlotte. The investments went to Charlotte. The family heirlooms, the jewelry, the savings accounts, all went to Charlotte. I received a modest cash inheritance. $20,000. Enough to be grateful for, but nothing compared to what Charlotte got. Mom knew I would appreciate it properly, Charlotte said, offering me a thin, victorious smile. The house needs someone who understands its value. Someone who can maintain it. You understand, right, Amelia? I nodded, unable to speak. Mr. Ellis looked uncomfortable but said nothing. After he left, Charlotte carefully placed the single-page will in a folder and locked it in the safe in Mom's study. I left that house feeling like a ghost, like I had been erased from my own family history. That night, alone in my small apartment, I cried until I had no tears left. Christmas Day was the loneliest day of my life. I sat in my apartment, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had happened. My mother was gone. My sister hated me enough to publicly humiliate me. And I had been left with scraps while Charlotte inherited everything. In the late afternoon, there was a knock at my door. A courier stood there, holding a small box covered in frost. "Delivery for Amelia Whitaker," he said. I took the box, confused. The return address was from Mr. Ellis's law office. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was my grandmother's simple pearl necklace. I remembered her wearing it every day. It was not expensive, just a single strand of modest pearls, but it had been her favorite. Under the necklace was a note. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. My hands shook as I read it. For my true heart. The final page is not yet turned. Trust Ellis. The final page is not yet turned. What did that mean? I held the necklace and the note for a long time, trying to understand. Then I carefully folded the note and placed it in my desk drawer. Something about it felt important. Like a secret message I did not yet have the code to decipher. My saving grace was my job. While Charlotte dealt in social currencies, appearances, and status, I dealt in history. I was a senior archivist at the Whitaker Museum, a small but respected institution in our town. My boss, Patrick, was a kind, slightly rumpled man who valued precision over pomp. He cared about the work, not the politics. The week after Christmas, still raw from everything, I dragged myself to work. Patrick called me into his cluttered office. Books were stacked everywhere. Old maps covered his desk. "Amelia," he said, his eyes serious behind his glasses. "I know you have been dealing with a lot, but I need to talk to you about something important." I braced myself, expecting bad news. Instead, he smiled. The Grant Foundation approved our proposal. The historical digitization project is fully funded. $3.2 million. My breath caught. And they specifically requested you as the lead project director. Your name, Amelia. This is your project. I stared at him, unable to process. This was career-making. This was huge. This was everything I had been working toward for years. "When do we start?" I asked, my voice shaking. Patrick grinned. "January 2nd. Right after the new year." Patrick explained the scope of the project. We would digitize the entire founding collection of the state. Letters, maps, property deeds, personal journals from the 1800s. Everything that told the story of how our region was settled and grew. The grant covered salaries for a full team, state-of-the-art equipment, and a 3-year timeline. My name would be on every publication, every presentation, every report. This was not just a job. This was a legacy. But all I could think was how Charlotte would react. She had always dismissed my work. Playing with old papers, she called it once. A cute little hobby for someone who does not want a real career. She had no idea this project existed. She had no idea a storm was building in my quiet, boring life. And I was learning to be its calm, focused center. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the project proposal in front of me. I thought about Mom's note. The final page is not yet turned. Maybe it was not just about the will. Maybe it was about my life. Maybe the story was not over yet. A week into January, I called Mr. Ellis and asked to meet. His office was in an old building downtown, all wood paneling and leather chairs. Shelves lined with law books surrounded us. "Thank you for the necklace," I said. "And for Mom's note." He smiled gently. "Your mother was a brilliant strategist, Amelia. She loved both her daughters. But she understood Charlotte in ways Charlotte never understood herself." He leaned back in his chair. "The will Charlotte has is valid. Everything I read at the house is legally binding. But it is incomplete." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Ellis explains something called the second-page doctrine. In certain legal situations, a will could have a supplementary clause held separately for protection. A safety measure. A contingency plan. Your mother created such a clause," he said carefully. "It remains dormant unless specific conditions are met. Actions defined by what she called familial hostility." He looked at me over his glasses. "Has your sister taken full possession of the estate?" I nodded. "She locked the will in her safe. She moved into the house. She has not even let me take any of Mom's personal items." Mr. Ellis made a note. "Then we wait. The trigger is not possession, Amelia. It is exclusion. If she tries to legally deny you your rightful connection to your family history, that is when the page turns." I left Mr. Ellis's office more confused than when I arrived. What did he mean by exclusion? Charlotte had already excluded me from everything. She had the house. She had the money. She had made it clear I was not welcome. What more could she do? But Ellis had been firm. "We wait. And when she acts, I will know." The not knowing was agony. But it was also a strange kind of power. I had a secret. Something Charlotte did not know existed. It felt like holding a key to a door I could not yet see. At work, the digitization project became my fortress. I hired a team. Bright-eyed graduate students. Meticulous researchers. We started with the property deeds, scanning each document carefully, noting every detail. We found discrepancies. Tiny errors in old records that changed property lines. We found a forgotten cemetery that had been paved over decades ago. We found letters that rewrote small pieces of local history. It was satisfying, concrete work. Every discovery felt like finding truth. Meanwhile, my personal life felt like a foggy battlefield where I could not see the enemy. But I kept working, kept moving forward, kept waiting for whatever was coming next. In mid-January, an ornate envelope arrived at my apartment. Heavy cream paper, gold embossing. It was an invitation to the town's annual New Year's Eve gala. Well, technically it was late. The gala was still weeks away, but invitations usually went out in December. This one had been forwarded from my mother's address. Charlotte was on the planning committee. She was always on every important committee. I almost threw the invitation away. The thought of attending, of seeing Charlotte in her element, surrounded by admirers, was unbearable. But something stopped me. Maybe it was Mom's voice in my head. Maybe it was the note about the final page. I placed the invitation on my mantle, leaning it against a candle. A silent challenge to myself. A question I did not yet have the courage to answer. Would I go? Would I face Charlotte in public again? Would I let her win? I did not know. But I kept the invitation. Just in case. In early February, my phone rang. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen. I considered not answering. We had not spoken since the will reading. But curiosity won. "Amelia," she said, her voice sweet and fake. "I have been thinking about the house. It is such a big property. So much to maintain. And, honestly, the market is perfect right now. I am thinking of selling." My blood went cold. Selling. Our childhood home. The house where Mom lived her entire adult life. The house full of memories. "You're selling Mom's house?" I asked, my voice tight. Charlotte sighed, like I was being difficult. "It is my house now, Amelia. And it makes financial sense. But I wanted to be generous. Fair. I can give you a small percentage from the sale. Maybe 5%? As a gesture. 5%. Of my family home. As a gesture. You do not need my permission," I said carefully. "You are the owner." She laughed. "I know. I just wanted you to know I am thinking of you. That I am being fair." After she hung up, I sat very still. This was it. The trigger Mr. Ellis had mentioned. She was not just keeping the house. She was erasing it. Erasing my connection to it. Converting our family history into cash. For her benefit alone. I went straight to Mr. Ellis's office. "She is selling the house," I said, the words tumbling out. For the first time since I had known him, Ellis smiled. It was small and sharp and satisfied. "Then the page turns," he said simply. He pulled out a thick folder from his filing cabinet. "Sit down, Amelia. It is time you understood what your mother did." He explained that our childhood home was not just a house. It was part of a historical trust established by our great-grandfather over 100 years ago. The property had specific rules attached to its inheritance. It was never meant to be sold for personal profit. It was meant to be held by the most responsible descendant, with a stipend provided for upkeep and kept accessible to the family. If any heir tried to sell the property for personal gain, ownership would automatically transfer to the next eligible heir. The definition of responsible was tied to stewardship, not social standing or birth order. And my mother had added a modern codicil to the trust. The determination of the responsible heir would be made by the family's longtime legal counsel. By Mr. Ellis himself. I stared at him, my mind racing. "So if Charlotte tries to sell?" He nodded. "The house becomes yours. By law. By history. By your mother's explicit design." I could barely process what Ellis was telling me. Why did not Mom just leave me the house in the first place? I asked. Ellis's expression was sad. Because Charlotte needed to reveal herself. Your mother knew Charlotte's nature. She knew that simply giving you the house would lead to years of legal battles, accusations of favoritism, manipulation. This way, Charlotte makes her own choice. She disqualifies herself through her own actions. He pulled out ancient, yellowed documents. Property records from the 1800s. Trust agreements signed by my great-grandfather. Legal opinions written decades ago. This is all real, he said. This is all enforceable. And Charlotte has no idea it exists. I felt dizzy. What do I do? Ellis was calm. Nothing. We let her proceed with the sale. We wait until she has committed legally. And then we file an injunction, citing the historical trust. At that point, the transfer of ownership is automatic. It was not about fighting. It was about letting Charlotte's own greed spring the trap. My role was to stay quiet, to stay strong, to wait for the truth to reveal itself. I left his office feeling like I was in a dream where justice was real, where patience was rewarded, where the quiet sister finally got to win. Back at the museum, my project was thriving. We had uncovered a founding father's lost diary, forgotten in a dusty storage box for decades. The pages were fragile, the ink faded, but the content was remarkable. Personal accounts of the town's early days. Political intrigue. Love affairs. Human stories that made history feel alive. Patrick was thrilled. He contacted the local newspaper, and they ran a feature story. Museum archivist uncovers hidden history, the headline read. My photo was in the paper. My name was there. For the first time in my life, I was visible. Not as Charlotte's sister. Not as anyone's daughter. Just as Amelia Whitaker, senior archivist, project director, keeper of stories. When Charlotte saw the article, she called me. I saw your little newspaper thing, she said dismissively. That is nice, Amelia. I am glad you have your work. Little newspaper thing. That was how she saw it. Meanwhile, I was building something real. Something that mattered. Something that was mine. And she had no idea how much bigger it was about to become. In early March, Charlotte listed the house. A for sale sign appeared on the front lawn. I drove past one afternoon and felt a physical pain seeing it. The house where I grew up. Where Mom lived. Where every memory of my childhood existed. Being sold like it meant nothing. But next to the pain was something else. Anticipation. Because I knew what Charlotte did not. That sign was the beginning of her downfall. Mr. Ellis filed the injunction 2 days later. A legal document citing a title ambiguity that needed to be resolved before the sale could proceed. Charlotte was furious. She called me screaming. What did you do? Did you try to block the sale? This is my house, Amelia. Mine. I stayed calm. I just asked some questions, Charlotte. Questions about the property history. Questions Mom wanted asked. She was incoherent with rage. You are trying to steal what is mine. You are pathetic. You have always been jealous of me. I just listened, holding the phone away from my ear slightly. Her words had no power over me anymore. The legal gears were already turning. The truth was already in motion. All I had to do was wait. At work, we finished the first phase of the digitization project. Thousands of documents scanned, cataloged, preserved. The Grant Foundation sent a representative to review our progress. She was impressed. This is exceptional work, she said, looking at our organized database. The foundation wants to do a major announcement. A press event. We want to showcase what historical preservation looks like when it is done right. Patrick pulled me aside after she left. Amelia, they want you to give the keynote speech. At the announcement event. In front of press, donors, community leaders. This is your moment. My professional life was becoming a stage. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the spotlight. I was ready for it. Because it was not about performance. It was about substance. It was about work I had actually done. Value I had actually created. Truth I had actually preserved. Charlotte could perform all she wanted. I had something real. In late March, 2 formal letters arrived on the same day. The first was from Mr. Ellis's office. It requested both Charlotte and me to attend a meeting on March 30th to resolve the property dispute regarding the estate of Margaret Whittaker. The battlefield was chosen. The date was set. The second letter was from the Grant Foundation. The announcement event for the digitization project was scheduled for April 2nd. 2 days after the property meeting. 2 monumental moments, back to back. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something huge. Something that would change everything. The night before the property meeting, I went to the museum alone. The building was dark and quiet. I walked through the archive, surrounded by centuries of stories. Letters from people long dead. Deeds to properties that had changed hands dozens of times. Wills that had sparked family wars. And I realized my family's story was just becoming another one of them. A story of hidden truth. Of a vengeful sister. Of a quiet victory that was years in the making. I felt a deep, solid peace. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had already won. Because I had become someone Mom would be proud of. Someone I was proud of. Charlotte arrived at Mr. Ellis's office dressed for war. An expensive suit. Perfect makeup. Her power outfit. I wore my work clothes. A simple blazer and slacks. Nothing fancy. Nothing performative. Just me. Ellis was stern and professional. He had prepared the conference room like a courtroom. Documents laid out. A projector set up. He started by presenting the history of the property. He showed the original land grant from the 1800s. He showed the trust agreement signed by our great-grandfather, specifying that the property was never to be sold for personal profit. He showed decades of legal opinions and property records, all supporting the trust. Charlotte laughed. It was a harsh, disbelieving sound. Old papers. This is nonsense. That was written over 100 years ago. It does not mean anything now. Ellis remained calm. Actually, Ms. Whittaker, historical property trusts are still legally binding, especially when they have been continuously maintained and referenced in subsequent estate documents, which this one has been. He pulled out another document, the second page of Mom's will, the one Charlotte had never seen, the one that activated the trust's transfer clause. Your mother knew about this trust. She reinforced it. And she specified that any attempt to sell the property for personal gain would trigger a transfer of stewardship to the next responsible heir. Ellis looked directly at Charlotte. By listing the property for sale, by attempting to convert a protected historical trust into personal profit, you have disqualified yourself as the heir. The property transfers, as of today, to your sister, Amelia Whittaker. The color drained from Charlotte's face. She looked at the documents, at Ellis, at me. This is not possible, she whispered. Ellis slid a formal transfer document across the table. It is not only possible. It is done. The house is now Amelia's. You will receive the cash inheritance originally left to her. $20,000. The roles, as it were, are reversed. Charlotte stood up, shaking. You planned this, she said to me, her voice venomous. You and Mom. You manipulated this whole thing. I looked at her calmly. No, Charlotte. Mom planned this. She saw who you were. Who you have always been. And she created a way for the truth to reveal itself. You did not have to try to sell the house. You did not have to exclude me from everything. You made those choices. You disqualified yourself. She stared at me, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something in her eyes that was not contempt or pity. It was fear. Fear that she had lost. that I had won, that everything had changed. Charlotte tried to fight it. She hired a lawyer. She filed motions. But every legal avenue led to the same conclusion. The trust was real. The second page of the will was valid. The transfer was final. By mid-April, the house was officially mine. I had the deed. I had the keys. I had my childhood home back. But Charlotte was not done trying to save face. She told everyone who would listen that I had manipulated Mom, that I had stolen what was rightfully hers, that I was vindictive and cruel. Some people believed her. Charlotte had always been good at controlling narratives, but most people were starting to see through it, especially after what happened at the announcement event. The Grant Foundation held the press conference at the museum on April 2nd. The main gallery was set up with chairs, local reporters, donors, community leaders. The mayor was there. Charlotte was there too. She would not miss a public event, even if it was my event. She sat in the back, arms crossed, watching with cold eyes. The foundation's director spoke first, praising the museum and the importance of historical preservation. Then Patrick introduced me. Our senior archivist and project director, Amelia Whitaker. I walked to the podium, my heart pounding, but my hands steady. I talked about the project, about the thousands of documents we had preserved, about the stories we had uncovered, about how history was not just dates and names, but real people with real lives who deserve to be remembered. I talked about the Founding Fathers' diary we had found, about letters from settlers, about property deeds that told stories of ambition and heartbreak. The room was quiet, listening. When I finished, there was applause. Real, genuine applause. The mayor stood up to speak. Before we conclude, he said, I want to personally commend Amelia for her dedication and expertise. This project does not just preserve our past. It secures our future. We are lucky to have someone of her caliber in our community. More applause. People came up to congratulate me afterward, to ask questions, to thank me for my work. And Charlotte sat in the back, alone, watching her pathetic sister become someone the town respected, someone they valued, someone they saw. The final blow came at the town's spring gala in late April. It was similar to the New Year's event, but smaller. Charlotte was still on the planning committee, though her influence was waning. People were starting to see through her charm, starting to understand what Mom had apparently known all along. I almost did not go, but something pulled me there. Maybe the same instinct that made me keep the original invitation months ago. I wore a simple blue dress. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace. I walked in alone, head high. Charlotte was there, surrounded by her usual circle. But the circle was smaller now, less enthusiastic. When she saw me, her face went hard. She said something to the people around her, and they all looked at me. I could imagine what she was saying. How I had stolen her inheritance. How I had manipulated everything. But then something happened. One of the women in Charlotte's circle, someone I had known since childhood, broke away and walked over to me. Amelia, I just wanted to say congratulations on the museum project. My daughter was one of your interns. She said working with you changed her life. Others followed. People congratulating me, asking about my work, treating me like I mattered. And Charlotte stood there, watching her social capital drain away, powerless to stop it. That night, as I drove home, I thought about revenge, about what it actually meant. I had not schemed against Charlotte. I had not plotted her downfall. I had just lived my life, done my work, honored my mother's wishes. And Charlotte's own actions had been her undoing. Her greed, her cruelty, her need to control everything. She had sprung her own trap. The house was mine now. Not because I fought for it, but because I was the responsible one. The one who valued history over profit, legacy over status, truth over performance. Mom had known. She had seen us both clearly, and she had created a way for the truth to reveal itself. The final page had turned. But it was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of mine. On May 1st, I moved into the house. My house. Our family home. I walked through each room, touching the walls, sitting in Mom's favorite chair, crying and laughing at the same time. Charlotte had taken all her things and left. She did not say goodbye. She did not apologize. She just disappeared from my life, taking her $20,000 and whatever remained of her pride. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate publicly. I just quietly settled in. I set up my grandmother's pearls on my dresser. I hung photos of Mom. I started the process of officially registering the house as part of the historical trust, ensuring it would never be sold, never be lost to our family. The museum project continued. We were getting international attention now. Researchers from universities were requesting access to our database. We were becoming a model for historical preservation. And my name was attached to all of it. Not Charlotte's sister. Not Margaret Whittaker's daughter. Just Amelia Whittaker. Senior archivist. Project director. Keeper of stories. Me. One afternoon in late May, I was working in the garden when a car pulled up. It was Mr. Ellis. He walked over, carrying a small box. "I wanted to give you this in person," he said. Inside the box were letters. Letters from my mother to Mr. Ellis, written over the course of several years. Planning. Strategizing. Protecting. She knew Charlotte would try to sell the house, Ellis said. She knew Charlotte would exclude you. And she knew you would be hurt. But she also knew you were strong enough to survive it. Strong enough to build your own life. I read through the letters, tears streaming down my face. Mom had seen everything. Had planned everything. Not to punish Charlotte, though that was part of it. But to protect me. To ensure I got what I deserved. To make sure the quiet daughter, the one everyone overlooked, would finally be seen. She loved you both, Ellis said. But she understood you needed protection from Charlotte. And Charlotte needed to face consequences for her actions. This was the only way to do both. After he left, I sat in Mom's garden and cried. For her. For me. For everything that had been lost and everything that had been found. By summer, my life had transformed completely. The museum project was nearly complete. We were planning a major exhibition for the fall, showcasing all the discoveries we had made. I had been offered a permanent position as Director of Historical Preservation with a significant raise. My career was thriving. The house was mine. My confidence was rebuilt. And Charlotte? I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another city. That she was struggling. That she had burned too many bridges here. I felt sad about it sometimes. Not sorry for what happened, but sad that it had to happen at all. That she could not just be kind. That she could not see me as equal instead of lesser. But mostly, I felt free. Free from her judgment. Free from her shadow. Free to be exactly who I was. Mom's final gift was not just the house. It was permission. Permission to take up space. To be proud of my work. To understand that quiet strength was still strength. That being overlooked did not mean being worthless. That the last page of one story could be the first page of another. On the anniversary of Mom's death, I held a small memorial service at the house. Just me and a few close friends. Patrick came. Mr. Ellis came. Some of my colleagues from the museum. We planted a tree in the garden. We shared memories. We honored her in the way she would have wanted. Quiet. Meaningful. Real. That evening, after everyone left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, wearing my grandmother's pearls, looking at the garden Mom had loved. I thought about that terrible Christmas, about being escorted out of the funeral, about the will reading where I felt so small, about all the pain that had led to this moment. And I realized something profound. Charlotte had tried to erase me, to make me invisible, to prove I did not matter. But in doing so, she had set me free. Free to discover my own worth. Free to build my own legacy. Free to understand that I did not need her approval or anyone else's. My revenge was not dramatic. It was not a confrontation or a public humiliation. My revenge was simply this: a life lived well. A career built on substance. A home filled with peace. A story with a better ending than anyone expected. The final page had turned, and the first page of my new story was just beginning. I had won, not because I fought, but because I endured, because I stayed true, because I trusted that the truth eventually always finds its way to the light. And in the end, that was enough.